as well as our interim COO, John King, our chief of staff, Carmen Chubb, and other members, senior members of our administration, including our city attorney, Nina Hickson, our CFO, Roosevelt Council, and other members of the administration who will be available to answer any questions that you may have at the end of this briefing if I am unable to answer those questions for you. Picking up on our last briefing on crime in Atlanta, overall violent crime continues on a downward trend. We are down by 18% compared to this time last year. I know for many people it doesn't feel like it if you are on the receiving end of any type of criminal activity, but that is worth noting. We continue to keep as a priority keeping our residents and our businesses and our visitors and our communities safe. And we are working very diligently with the leadership of Interim Chief Bryant to make sure that we continue to see reduction in crime in our city. Some of the new strategies that APD has implemented to address violent crime in our city includes increasing collaboration with local and federal partners to prevent and solve crimes, leveraging intelligence to focus resources more effectively in neighborhoods that are experiencing increases in violent crime, enhancing community-based partnerships that encourage people to report incidents, but to also create positive interactions with police officers and to help build proactive relationships. Something that was not really covered in the local media, but was noted by the Washington Post was something that we led on in Atlanta. We withdrew our officers from the federal task force because they were not allowed to wear body cam videos. Attorney General Bob Barr and the Justice Department reversed course. The Washington Post article largely credited what we did in Atlanta as the reason that they have changed the national policy. Many of the officers on the federal task force will now be allowed to wear body cameras, which is extremely important. You all probably recall there was a deadly shooting in Atlanta. One of our officers was on loan to a federal task force, but because he was on loan to a task force, he was not required to wear a body camera. And so this is not only helpful for the public as a whole, but obviously for our officers as well. So we are very pleased once again to be on the forefront of change and leading on criminal justice reform in our city. As we move forward with our efforts to keep Atlanta safe, we know that we cannot be successful without the support and involvement of our communities. With that in mind, every Wednesday, starting today, APD will begin publicizing Atlanta's most wanted offenders on our social media platforms. The goal of Atlanta's most wanted is to get the public more involved in the apprehension of people who commit crimes and also to help collect information to solve crimes. Many of you all know my family was on the receiving end of a tragedy several years ago with the murder of my nephew. And that murder would not have been solved without the support of the community and giving information to help identify the people who were responsible. So please be on the lookout for that. There may be something that may seem to be small to you, but when it fits into a bigger puzzle, it is often helpful to APD to help solve many of these crimes. Street racing. We know that this remains top of mind for many. As Interim Chief Bryant has shared with us previously, sometimes it's street racing and sometimes it sounds like street racing, meaning that people often enhance their engines and whatever it is that they do. I'm not an expert, so I can't tell you what it is they do to make the engines so loud. But it often sounds like street racing. Either way, it's very concerning to the public and to the communities who have to listen to this day in and day out. From January of this year to November 15th, APD has issued 560 street racing violations. They've also made several changes to combat this reckless activity, including deploying resources at specific times and through specialty units such as SWAT and their motor and air units, identifying and disrupting operation networks through the use of intelligence, and specifically targeting organizers of these events. We know that many people have come from out of state for these events, increasing enforcements and penalties for those who engage in street racing. And we believe that these changes will help reduce the disruption that this is causing on our streets. Just over this past weekend, in concert with the state and local partners, APD conducted a total of 190 traffic stops, issued 173 citations, made 14 arrests, and impounded 7 vehicles. Auto theft also remains an issue. And again, we're calling on our residents and our visitors to please be thoughtful about securing your vehicles. What we are seeing is an increase in the number of unlocked cars, often with keys or key fobs left inside, that are being stolen. Sometimes these cars are left running when the owner briefly steps away. So again, oftentimes with auto thefts, these are crimes of opportunity. So please be thoughtful about removing your keys from your car and not leaving your keys inside your car, leaving your car running. We know as it gets colder, people often go outside and start their car to warm it up. And we quite often see an increase in the colder months. So please continue to be thoughtful about that. While we continue to address crime in our city, and I just want to make one other note on that before I go on to our next section. Something that has been noted is that we've had a number of shootings around nightclub areas in the city, one including a young man, a young artist just a couple of weeks ago. What we are seeing, again, because Atlanta is open for business and other cities don't have nightclubs and bars open, we are seeing a number of people traveling from out of state to come to Atlanta to go to the nightclubs and to the bars because we're open as if we're not in the midst of a pandemic. So that's why a number of these shootings, you will likely note if you paid attention to the details, a number of them involve people from out of state. That seems to be a trend that we are seeing, that when the nightclubs are closed in Chicago, people are coming to Atlanta to party. So not a lot that we can do about that locally, because obviously the governor has made the decision to keep the state open, but that seems to be contributing to what we're seeing in and around our bars and nightclubs. While we continue to address crime in our city, I'm pleased to announce a major step of our administration in our push toward the work of criminal justice reform. The services of the Police Executive Research Forum, PERF, those services have been retained to conduct a top to bottom review of APD policy and training. This will be a comprehensive review across APD policies, procedures, and all levels of training, from new recruits to field and in-service training. It will strategically focus on areas where APD can achieve the greatest impact, including use of force and related policies. PERF was established in 1976 to improve the delivery of police services and the effectiveness of public safety. Because of their longstanding commitment to progressive leadership in policing, PERF is relied upon by police leaders nationwide to provide critical management services and technical assistance. Their work will provide continuous guidance and feedback to help inform policy improvements and training modifications over the course of their 18-month engagement. We've also engaged a local planning and community engagement firm, Urban Planning Management, to ensure that all Atlantans have a voice in the development and review of reform policies. Again, thank you to the advisory council that gave us the initial recommendations. We're grateful for all of their work, and this is a continuation of that work. And the local firm that we have retained, Urban Planning, specializes in planning and development work and has led effective efforts with the city, Invest Atlanta, Beltline, Atlanta Housing previously, so they are no stranger to working with the city. They will also work directly with PERF and the city to establish a holistic strategy for ensuring Atlanta's communities have input, as I mentioned, and with additional consideration and recommendations on community engagement will also be something that's top of mind for them to make sure that our communities are involved, because we know this work will not be successful unless our communities are comfortable with these reforms and that they have the positive impact that we are seeking to have in our communities. Let's see. Also, I mentioned the Use of Force Advisory Council. As of August 5th, I've issued 9 administrative orders related to the recommendations that were made. 5 of those 9 orders have been implemented, 4 are in progress. Also pleased to announce a new website that our administration has launched that increases transparency and catalogs our public safety and justice reform plans and accomplishments. The website, atlanta.gov/justice reform. That's atlanta.gov/justice reform will serve as a central repository for information on 3 key areas: police reform, justice reform, and the Reimagining ACDC initiative. ACDC is our Atlanta Detention Center. The website will be updated regularly as new initiatives or announcements are available, and it's also meant to be an easy to use and informative resource and frequently asked questions section for the public to learn more about the city's justice reform efforts. Moving on to Hurricane Zeta cleanup and Operation Clean Sweep. Thank you again to our city departments and our employees who assisted with cleanup efforts resulting from Hurricane Zeta. The Department of Transportation and Public Works cleared 518 downed trees from the city's right-of-way and in the parks. And also thank you to our utility partners. This storm had quite an impact in our city, so we're grateful for our city employees and our partners who were able to get us back up and running and cleaned up. Also, Operation Clean Sweep. If you had noticed, the city is looking good. I drive around quite a bit, and I have noticed the difference in our city. Since we launched Operation Clean Sweep, our public works team has cleared more than 1,120 illegal dump sites, and that's equated to 1,222 tons of debris, 3,090 tons of bulk trash, 3,992 illegal signs, and more than 15,272 tons of curbside waste. They have also mowed 49 miles of the city's right-of-way. You can see our weekly progress each Tuesday on our social media challenges. Thank you. Again, I have to mention Justin Johnson. I know I'm going to miss some names, but for leading this effort and everyone who's helped support Justin, Jackie Robinson, and just the entire operations team and our public works team. So we appreciate you. Support for the homeless. We had initially said that we, based on CDC recommendations, we would not clean out encampments during the pandemic unless we were able to make sure that they had housing, that we could make housing available to them. I am very pleased to announce a very robust housing initiative that builds upon the work that we began during the pandemic. We have an opportunity to house 800 highly vulnerable people experiencing homelessness by leveraging more than $18 million in CARES Act funding combined with philanthropic contributions. Extensive street outreach efforts are underway to identify and assess individuals experiencing homelessness. Partners for Home and their outreach partners kicked off this initiative by assisting more than 75 people who had set up a homeless encampment just off of Prior Street. Thank you to Councilmember Winslow, to our constituent services team, and to everyone who worked to make sure that that area was cleaned up. And again, 75 people from that encampment have been housed through our work with Partners for Home and our other outreach partners. And remember, in Atlanta, it's not just about housing, it's also about making sure that people have the supportive services to address those issues that have led them to homelessness. Also, thank you to, I think I mentioned, the Department of Public Works and also GDOT for their partnership with this, and Catherine Marchman. We appreciate your leadership on this as well. And then as we prepare for the holiday season, again, a reminder that COVID-19 is still with us. Test positivity in Fulton County is up 5.4%. DeKalb County is 5.5%, and Georgia is at 7.3%. In Fulton County, 43.7% of the new cases were in Atlanta. African Americans in Atlanta represented 43.6% of new COVID cases, but 83% of the deaths. So a reminder that COVID is hitting African American communities, Black and Brown communities, especially hard. You all have heard me talk about the lingering long haul symptoms that my husband continues to have. Although we had COVID back in July, he continues to have migraine headaches, fatigue, and something new. His sense of smell comes and goes. So, you know, this is nothing that any of us should take lightly. And please be mindful of that over the Thanksgiving holidays. My mother called me about a month ago and said she thought we could have dinner at my niece's house and we try and keep it to just 50 people this year. So I, quickly shut that down and reminded her that that was probably 45 people too many. So we'll be doing virtual Thanksgiving dinner in our family. We continue to remind people to limit your gatherings to 10 or more. I've seen many of the same things 10 or less. I've seen many of the same things that you all have seen regarding, our family often does Thanksgiving dinner buffet style, recommendations on having just one person prepare the plates, etc. I know this is tough for our family, as I'm sure it's for all of you all. So hopefully this time next year, we'll be having a very different conversation. But please be careful and please be thoughtful, especially about other people in your families who may not be able to fight off COVID. And let's make sure I covered everything else. Just a few stats that we have as we continue to offer relief to residents who are impacted by COVID economically. There was a 2020 Metro Atlanta Speak survey by the Atlanta Regional Commission. According to the survey, 28% of City of Atlanta residents who were employed before the pandemic were laid off, terminated, or furloughed. Due to COVID-19, 32% of those residents have received help from a food bank since March. About half, 49% of all Atlanta respondents said that they either had hours or wage reductions or had to quit for safety reasons. And 52% of City of Atlanta residents said they knew someone who had contracted COVID. So again, as we approach the holiday season, just know there are many amongst us who are experiencing hardships, and please keep them in mind as many of us plan for our end of the year giving. I know many of these families will need support. And the City of Atlanta continues to offer the Emergency Housing Assistance Program. The program guidelines have been expanded to include mortgage payments, and qualified households can now receive up to $5,000 in assistance. You can find out more about that program at atlstrong.com. I think I have that right. Someone will correct me. And also, thank you to Dr. Jeter for the ATL Wellness Summit that was hosted. Mental health continues to be something that, as we think about our physical health and well-being, mental health and emotional stability is something that suffering young people, older people, a lot of people are dealing with anxiety and depression this season. So please be mindful of that as well. Make sure that as you do your physical health check-ins with your friends and loved ones, that you're doing those mental and emotional health check-ins as well. I saw a very sad story just last night on one of the nightly newscasts about a 12-year-old boy who had committed suicide, and his father attributed his suicide to the isolation he's been experiencing with COVID. So if you would like more information on this, you can visit atlstrong.org/wellness summit and get some helpful information, if not for yourself, for others. And with that, I think that concludes my remarks. I will now open up for any questions that you all may have, if you'll give me an opportunity to get my screen situated. All right, I'm ready.
If you have a question, please be sure to raise your hand. And once you're called on, please state your name and affiliation. Richard, you're up. Go ahead, Richard.
Is he muted? I don't know who Richard is. Okay, let's go to the next one. We can come back.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Richard Belcher, good morning.
Hey, happy Thanksgiving in advance.
Thank you, same to you.
Where are you on the council resolution that passed this week that would asks the legislature to change the law to allow seizure of vehicles involved in street racing?
I believe that was a resolution, not an ordinance.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's not binding. It's just it's a recommendation. So I don't have any plans to veto it. I don't know if I will sign it or if it'll go in just by operation of law. But I don't have any plans to veto it.
Do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I think that the city council can make the recommendation, and I think that the state legislature should study it and make a determination. I mean, the street racing is a problem. So I do think there needs to be enhanced penalties. I don't know the details of the resolution in terms of, is this a first offense? Is this a second, third, fourth, fifth offense? That's something I need to get a little more information on. But I think that we have to make use of everything that's at our disposal to let people know how serious we take this. It's dangerous. It's a nuisance, but it's also extremely dangerous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maynard, you are next.
Michael, can you give me the full name and what entity they're with? So when you just call off, I'm assuming that's Maynard
Yes,
Eaton, but I don't know who it is.
Maynard Eaton. Yes, ma'am.
Well, Mayor,
Good morning.
how are you? I like your new attractive look there, by the way.
Well, it's a long story, but thank you, Maynard.
Listen, any word from the Biden administration? Are you about to leave Atlanta and join the Biden administration in DC?
I've not gotten any calls about leaving Atlanta. I have a pretty busy, a pretty good job here, so I've not gotten any calls from them.
Would you want to go?
You know, I would never say never, but there's nothing before me to consider.
Understood. Happy holidays.
Same to you. I laughed when you said that, Maynard, because I know that you knew my dad. So everybody could just turn off of this, but I had the bright idea to cut off my relaxer. And I sent some friends a picture of my dad. I said, this is what I look like after I work out. My dad full afro. So thank you for noticing.
Salute to you and your father.
Thank you.
Stephen Deere with the AJC.
Hey, Mayor, thanks for doing these.
Hey, good morning.
I have a question about the perf review. When do you expect that to begin and end? What's the timeline? And what's the cost of that review?
So we have had an outside entity who's going to cover the cost of the review. So I don't know the exact amount, but that's not being covered by the city. That's being covered by, I'll let somebody tell me if I can share who it's being covered by. So I'll answer that in a second. But it's going to take over 18 months. So it's going to begin, I believe we signed the contract this week, so it should begin immediately. Or they signed the contract this week, and then it's going to take over 18 months. And I'm checking just to see how much information I can. I'll let you know, Stephen. Hold on. Somebody's telling me the answer. Give me a second.
Sure.
Okay, I'll come back to you on that.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Scott Tribby.
And then, Scott, before we get to you, I think Chief Brian wanted to join in. Chief, can you had some comments on street racing and some other arrests? I'm sorry, if you can join in on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning. Absolutely. As it relates to the street racing, as you stated, it continues to be a nuisance and a very dangerous aspect of what's happening in our city. Last night we had we were able to make an arrest of an individual that we believe was one of the organizers of one of the largest street racing events that we've had in the city. And so we had identified him for a period of time. He was aware that we were after him. We were able to take him into custody on last night. Going forward, what we will continue to do is partner not just with our state partners, but have a more collaborative plan as it relates to the agencies that are the cities and jurisdictions that are around us, being that they too are being faced with some of these very same street racing and organizing. And then areas that we recognize that we are seeing repetitive acts of street racing and traffic violations. We'll work with the Department of Public Works to reevaluate how we deploy the barricades in those spaces to address some of those areas as well. And so we think that those things will be quite effective in going forward. And I think that is, Mayor, as you spoke of what we're seeing as it relates to the violence in our community, the plan, the Atlanta Police Department, as well as your office, have worked together to be more aggressive and collaborative in using every tool that we have to go after these nightclubs and these adult entertainment spots to see how we could reduce those events that we're seeing there. So right now, as of to date, we've had over 316 inspections of night locations to evaluate their status in our city. Anytime that we have an event, we deploy additional resources to go and evaluate to make sure that they're operating appropriately. And so we think that these strategies will help as well. As well as we begin to go into our holiday season, we will deploy our holiday plan starting next week. Because as you stated, we're starting to see a significant increase as it relates to auto theft and people breaking into autos. The thing that we're seeing around the autos being broken into is because the newer cars, many of these newer cars have the key fob, and it allows for people to, quite often people leave the key fob in those vehicles. We've even made an arrest of a young man who told us that all they do is go out and pull the handles on the cars and see which one's open. And they then victimize that individual. And so it is important that people pay more attention to how they are securing their vehicles. And we do recognize, even though we are in COVID, we anticipate that there will still be a surge of individuals going to the shopping plazas and things of that nature. And so we are asking that they be much more vigilant and more secure as it relates to that. We will augment our security plans by deploying in some of these areas as well to help reduce that. And then lastly, I think that is, well, not lastly, but I think it's important, as you spoke on us having a partnership with our federal partners. We've deployed in partnership with the FBI and several of our other federal partners. We deployed Operation Phoenix, which have allowed us to net 12 violent offenders that will be going to the federal level for indictment. We think that that will have a significant impact as it relates to some of the violence that we're seeing. As well as our partnerships with the community, we think that it is clearly important that public safety is the responsibility of everyone in this city. And so, as you stated, we're doing our top 10 wanted offenders. We think that the citizens being involved in helping us identify and locate these individuals will play significant dividends in helping keeping our city safe, as well as us having a very robust media platform, pushing out as much information as we can and partnering with the community in that respect. So that's where we are, Mayor, unless you have any further questions of me.
No, I appreciate that. And back to the question that Stephen Deere had. Stephen, I didn't want to get ahead of the group that is covering the cost for us, but they have said that they are ready to publicly announce their funding of the PERF engagement, and that's ACP. I'm sure you're familiar with ACP. It's comprised of CEOs from across Atlanta, CEOs and corporate leaders across Atlanta who serve as an advisory entity to me, and they are covering those costs in the 18-month engagement of PERF. We're not going to wait until the end of the 18 months to implement the recommendations. We're going to do it as we roll along, but we expect the engagement to last in its entirety for 18 months. And PERF came highly recommended. Over the course of the summer, I talked to multiple entities, multiple people about criminal justice reform and who was a leader in that area. There were, I believe, three people/groups that rose to the top, and PERF was the one that we have opted to go with. So I'm looking forward to working with them and getting their recommendations. All right.
Scott Truby.
Hi, Mayor. How you doing?
Hey, Scott, how are you? How's your family?
Oh, we're doing good. We're hanging in there, and I hope that Derek gets better soon. I know that's been a long haul for you guys. I had a question related to coronavirus, and that is, what steps, as cases are growing, what steps can your administration take to help curb it? I know you have certain limitations on what cities can do and local governments can do, but what steps can you do, and what steps are you going to be taking? And then separately, what would you recommend the state do, since they are a lot of ways the driver of what's happening in our COVID response?
Yeah, that's a tough balance because we're balancing, obviously, the severity of COVID and the impact that it can have on families and people, including death, with the economic impact. So for as painful as the dispute was with the governor, I think in many ways it was very helpful for us to have that public spat, because I'm seeing more people wear masks now than I previously saw. And this is just anecdotal with my moving out and about. So I'm very happy about that. I think some places are doing better than others, just in terms of how they're managing social distancing, et cetera. And I think it's not just incumbent upon me as a leader, or the governor as a leader, or the mayors across the state, but it really is incumbent upon all of us to continue to be thoughtful on how many people you let into your establishment. How do you space people apart? The personal responsibility part of it. I went out to celebrate something with a friend maybe 2 months ago. We all took COVID tests before we went out together, before we went to a restaurant and sat outside, but we all took tests before we did it. So I think there are things that we can all do to the best of our ability. But at the end of the day, it has to be about personal responsibility.
So you don't foresee, urging the governor to make any changes to his executive orders or anything like that, or you?
I don't think that's the best use of my energy. The governor's made his position very clear. He knows where I stand. I know where he stands on this. The good thing is he's urging people to wear masks. I'm urging people to wear masks. I know I mentioned ACP. The thing that we were fortunate about in Atlanta, the first download that I got from Dr. Del Rio at Emory University was during an ACP meeting. And that's when I left out of there and made the decision to shut down the City Hall and the other city facilities. The good thing, sitting in that room with me at that time were 20 to 30 CEOs who also walked out with the same information and made decisions regarding their job centers. So we have some synergy and connectivity in this city that a lot of other people don't have. And then on the advisory commission, we have representatives from businesses and community-based representatives, schools, et cetera. So that's helped us tremendously. If I had a recommendation for the governor, if he's not done it already, I know that he had some smaller task force, but perhaps something statewide with that same type representation might be helpful. I know that he did it early on because I was on the homeless, I was over the homeless piece on it, but that would be my recommendation. It's been helpful to us. And we're actually going back to our advisory committee just to determine if there are any changes that we need to make. But, what concerns me now, I have one child who is virtual, 3 have gone back to school. I'm less concerned about the spread because my kids' classrooms are fairly small. But again, this mental health, emotional well-being piece. My 10-year-old son says to me every day that he doesn't want to go to school because he's afraid he's going to bring COVID back home and we're all going to get sick and die. Like, this is a 10-year-old. So there's so many areas that we just, I don't think we know the long-term impacts of this on, but that mental health piece is a big area. And I think we've got to have a larger conversation citywide and statewide on that too.
Valencia Jones with CW.
Okay, hello, Mayor. As he stated, Valencia Jones with the CW TV station. I just wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on how Georgia and Atlanta have been the center of attention here in terms of this presidential election, with having to retally all the ballots, these accusations of voter fraud that particularly hit home here, and it's getting the attention of the nation.
Well, all eyes are on Georgia, and I said it during the course of the campaign. You all know I've been a big supporter of Joe Biden, that the South was going to have something to say. And we said it loud and clear during the primary and caucus season. And obviously with this last election with Georgia going blue, my reminder to people is that we just got to turn back out and vote. We didn't get any reports of voter fraud. As you probably recall, Valencia, we signed an executive order that allowed our employees to take paid time off to work the polls, to volunteer at the polls, and also to go and vote. I believe we had over 30 employees who took advantage of the paid time off to go and volunteer at the polls. So very happy that that happened. But at the end of the day, we didn't get any reports of fraud. Obviously, the first couple of days of early voting were very challenging with the lines and the equipment. But once we got past those first couple of days, things seem to have gone smoothly. So I'm grateful that the Secretary of State has stood his ground just in terms of the integrity of the election. I suspect that the vote tally will stand and that Georgia will be called for Biden, but there is an election January 5th. And also reminding people there's a runoff going on now for the 5th Congressional District that you can vote in, and then early voting will begin soon for the January 5th election, and people still have time to register to vote for that election as well.
Okay, thank you.
JD with the AJC.
Hi, Mayor. Thanks for talking with us. I appreciate it.
Good morning.
Morning. I wanted to get your thoughts quickly on the plans from the Department of City Planning to reimagine Peachtree Street or redesign it as a shared space to kind of spur economic development downtown. Do you think that's a good idea? What are your thoughts on that plan?
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. What I said when I was on city council, to the extent I had any regrets, the one regret that I had was that I was not more engaged with the planning department early in my tenure. And I spoke earlier about community involvement. This is an area that a lot of people just don't even know what that means. But what we know with our city, it's about long-term planning and vision for our city. There are often things that are envisioned 20 years ago, that may have been envisioned 20 years ago that don't come online for another 25 years. So I think this is a good opportunity, especially with where we are with COVID and how we are trying to become a more pedestrian-friendly city. I think it's a great idea and look forward to seeing what the results are.
Definitely. And I wanted to also quickly get your thoughts for another story that I'm working on about the Chattahoochee Brick site, the old Chattahoochee Brick Company site on the west side. There's been some discussions with Norfolk Southern now leasing the site. They didn't have to go through the city to get a special use permit for it. Some of the neighbors there are upset, and officials like Councilman Dustin Hillis are urging the city to maybe buy the site, and they want to see it repurposed as city park. I want to know if you've been a part of any of those discussions and if you have any thoughts on whether the city should do anything to kind of preserve this historic land.
Well, I'm very familiar with this site. If you haven't read it, I think a former AJC reporter wrote the book Slavery by Another Name, and it talks about many of the buildings and areas in Atlanta that were supported by prison labor, often unfairly. And the Chattahoochee brick site, one of those sites, so extreme historical significance to our city. I know that there potentially may be some litigation involved with this, so I've got to be very careful on what I say about that, but I am closely monitoring it, and I am very much aware of the historical significance of this site.
Thank you.
That concludes the questions.
All right, thank you. Hopefully we'll all have a quiet Thanksgiving. Quiet is good in the life of a city. So if I don't have an opportunity to see you all again before Thanksgiving, wishing you peace and happiness and blessings for the holiday season. And I look forward to just being able to breathe a bit, I hope. So I hope that you all will have some downtime next week as well. Until next time, thank you all for joining us.